Thank you, and apologies, I was 3 minutes late. I had a clinic to do in St. James's Hospital this morning, and I wasn't able to get anybody to cover me, and then there were the inevitable roadworks on the way. So anyway, glad to be here, and I hope you're having an enjoyable event. So I'm going to talk to you about age proofing, and I would start by saying that whereas the earlier we start, the better, it is in fact never too late. And I hope I share with you some information that is all evidence-based. Nothing I'm going to say hasn't been actually established by scientific evidence and proof. But because I put that caution there is because there are a lot of myths about it. And some of the myths are actually compounded by the fact that those generations of them were actually scientists and, were, I would say, scientists in their day, but they have an ulterior motive or conflict of interest in themselves developing products, etc. And then promoting the science which promotes the product. That's not uncommon nowadays. So nothing I say will be product related because I don't have any products. So we have been hankering as a human species for the solution or the answer to eternal youth for a very, very long time. And actually, it's very rampant now at the moment. You can hardly open any newspaper without 1 to 2 articles, something to do with the aging process, something to do with the so-called anti-aging. The emperors, the most successful time in Chinese history was between the 600s and 900s AD. They had a very sophisticated society then, deeply embedded in culture, and 22 emperors during that 300-year period. And just to give you some idea that those elected to their civil service were elected on the basis of merit, how good they were, how much they deserved it, not on who their mother was or much more likely their father. So it was a very sophisticated time in Chinese history, and yet their alchemists were busy during a 300-year period of time concocting solutions to eternal youth, what they refer to as the elixirs. And in those elixirs were mercury, cinnabar, gold, sulfur, all four extremely toxic. And during 300 years, 6 of 22 emperors died from poisoning. And of course, what the emperors did, the noblemen did. So many noblemen likewise died. And graves have been opened of noblemen and emperors who died at that period of time with jars beside them and remnants of these elixirs in the jars. So what my point is, despite the fact that it was a very sophisticated period of time in Chinese history, the most generally acknowledged, it took 300 years for the penny to drop that, maybe the medicines that your man has given me aren't the best after all. And unfortunately, time and time again, we're falling into that same pit. So that's why I say it's really important that whatever we say, whatever I share, is properly evidence-based. Now, for all of mankind that we know of, where we have good, strong history, about 3 to 4% of us lived over the age of 65 and over. And Socrates, who took his own life because the regime at the time didn't believe in his philosophical beliefs, he only lived to 71. But we know from writings of his 3 best friends that they lived to 80, 79, and 75 respectively. So this increase in lifespan isn't actually unique. It has been happening throughout human history. And of course, that was BC. But now, it has escalated. And the numbers of people who are living longer have increased significantly and proportionately. 22% in Germany, 26% in Japan, 19% in England, and we're close enough to that, 17% in Ireland are over the age of 65. And let me just show you this to explain how that is happening. Year on year, since the 1800s, we're living approximately 3 months longer. So that during the last 200 years, the average life expectancy has doubled. So in the 1800s, you could expect to live to mid-40s. Now you can well expect to live to mid-80s and beyond. And actually that translates nicely into this, that a baby girl born today into a family in Ireland is likely to live 3 months longer than her sister who was born last year. Because that linear trajectory is continuing. So that's the statistic. And the biggest increase, proportionately, worldwide, globally, is in the numbers of people over the age of 85 and 100. Yeah, 85 and 100. Look at the big, a 400% increase in the proportion of people over the age of 100. When I was a young junior doctor, if there was anybody aged 100 on the ward, we would all go up to have a look. It was so extraordinary. Now that's 35 years ago, probably plus that. But it's clearly not the case now. There are lots of reasons for this. Better healthcare, immunization, antibiotics, technologies, better quality water. The change in water has probably been one of the biggest changes in longevity worldwide. Food quality, hygiene, better housing, lifestyle, etc. And more prosperity, generally speaking. In fact, the more prosperity bit is very, very important, because there are places in the world where there's a big gap in the have and the have-nots. And the have-nots can live 25 years less than the haves. On the island, where am I now? Wexford, the other side of us, England and the United Kingdom. On that island, that is the case, north and south. There's that much of a discrepancy. We'll talk about that. So, I am the principal investigator. When I'm doing my research, I do research in the longitudinal study of aging in Ireland. It's a terrific study. I suspect there are people who are in the study in this room, because it represents 1 in every 156 people over the age of 50 in Ireland. When we recruited, that was the representativeness. And it's a study to understand the experience of what it's like to get older in Ireland. And we measure, it's an omnibus study, so we measure pretty much everything. Because how you experience your aging process isn't just about whether or not you have high blood pressure, or whether or not you have 5 children rather than 1. It's about everything combined, your income, your household, your social engagement, etc. And your health, of course. And actually, it's about your life course. What your experience of living was like since birth. What the household you were brought up in was like. And what your experiences within that household were. So all of those factors actually influence the aging process. So it's an amazing study, but it's amazing because the participants contribute 5 hours at least every 2 years to giving to this study, so we can understand what it's like to age in Ireland, the process of aging in Ireland. And we've used that to inform policy. It's been used in more than 200 policy documents to inform policy documents. Unfortunately, I might add, I am not responsible for delivery of policy, because it doesn't always translate, does it? That's a great idea for a new policy. It doesn't necessarily translate into, and this is what we're going to do about it. Anyway, it has informed policy. It's informed very, very novel research and comparability, because we developed the study so that we could, with core questions that we could compare with 26 other countries worldwide. That's very helpful. That's also helpful for us to inform government. Well, compared to England, or compared to France, or compared to Cyprus, this is how, on blood pressure, say, we're behaving in Ireland, that's how many we're diagnosing, that's how many we're missing, and that's how much better those other countries are. So it's very, very valuable to be able to have comparability as well. So one of the fundamental questions is, why do we age? Why do we age at all? What exactly is the aging process? And how can we measure aging? How can we measure the biology of aging? Not just your number, not just the number of candles on your birthday cake, but actually, what do your cells look like? I have some really positive data with respect to that, and ways that you can modify that. First of all, we don't all look the same. We haven't all had the same life experiences. We don't have the same experiences now, so there's a lot of heterogeneity as we get older. As babies when they're born, I don't know that there are any new mothers in the audience, but I think there are lots of new grandmothers. I know, even to grandmothers, I think I can make the following statement. Most babies look the same. We all pretty much look the same at birth. But as we age, we change. And what are the factors that make those changes? These are 6 men. They were all aged 60 when these photographs were taken.
Oh my goodness.
Oh, yeah.
Putting the slide up and then just got that response. Anyway, she said, oh yeah, heartthrob. Right, and she wasn't talking about Donald Trump. Anyway, but look how different they look. They're all the same age, but they don't look the same age. They don't look like they've had the same life experiences. Now, of course, it's quite likely that some of them have a local surgeon who's assisting on route. I'm not talking about that. So why do we age? And one of the things that influences with aging is it our genes. Now, hands up, those of you who think it's genes that are mostly involved. Anybody who's read the book? Okay. So, mostly genes. Okay. And so the vast majority of the audience think it isn't genes. Put the hands up those who think it isn't genes, so we get some feel for that. Okay. So, the facts are that 20% of our lifespan, of how long we live, are because of our genes. We've fixed genes, about 25 to 30,000 genes. We're born with those. We can do nothing about our genes. We've got those. But they're only contributing to 20%, 1/5 of the lifespan. That's not a lot. This is very recent data. We know it from identical twins who have exactly the same genes, but when we look at their biology, what's going on in the cells, they're aging differently. Because the rest of it is due to environmental factors. All the things I said, what the household was like when you grew up, what the food was like, what your relationship with your family was like, what your socioeconomic status was like, what your work was like, what your stress levels were. Stress is huge. What kind of physical activity you were able to take throughout your life. What relationships you had, relationships with your children, friendships, etc. They're the things that actually influence how quickly or how slowly we age. Now, I want to take a sort of a little sidetrack here because this is fun. And these are creatures that live very long periods of time. And of course, what is of interest to people like me is what is it in their cells? Because we share most of our cells with this Antarctic sponge. We're very same cells to a large degree. So what is it that's enabling this sponge to live to 1,500 years? Isn't that amazing? What is it about his cells or her cells? The bowhead whale is the longest lived mammal, and the longest we know of in our family is 200. 111 years. So I said to you, the amazement at 100-year-olds when I was a junior doctor, a whale 211 years. And this gentleman creature, the jellyfish, probably doesn't have an aging process, because it can go from a polyp, in other words a baby, to an adult, and back again to a polyp. So that is very of great interest to the science community. What we do know is that what all of these creatures share is resistance to oxidative stress in cells, oxidative strain. And I'll come on to what I mean by that later. But I just want to show you now, we can't manipulate human genes, the 20% in our genes. We can't manipulate those for the aging process at present. But this is just some sense of where the science is in this area, because one of the genes that we do know contributes to living longer is a DAF2 gene. And a tiny worm, C. elegans, which is the size of that comma there. I don't know if you can see
We can't
that comma.
see it, yeah.
It's not the size of that comma there, it's the size of that comma on an A4 sheet. It's tiny. We, again, shares an awful lot of genes with us, and also has the DAF2 genes that we do, and we can manipulate their DAF2 gene to change its activity by just changing the temperature it's in. So, this is a video of a healthy young worm. They live for 2 weeks normally, these C. elegans worms, 2 weeks. So there you go, moving away, wiggling around there, thick, strong, robust. 2 weeks later, this is the same worm, just before it's ready to die. The researcher has to poke it to get it to move at all. It's very frail. Now, by changing the temperature that the worm was brought up in for 2 weeks, just modifying it, not too much, increasing the temperature or decreasing it, modified the DAF2 gene, which influenced a whole lot of oxidative stress processes in cells. And this is a 2-week-old worm after that simple modification of the gene. So I'm sharing this with you because you can see this is very exciting science. Now, we're at the worm. You or I will not see our genes being mutated, that's for sure, because it's going to take a lot longer than that. But there's a lot of research going on in this area. Can we mutate genes just by changing something like, in this case, the ambient temperature? So environmental factors are what make these men look so different and clearly age so differently, because actually how you look, minus surgery, does reflect quite closely what your cells look like biologically, how you're aging, how your cells are aging. So if somebody looks young, and I have to add feels young, because how you perceive yourself is hugely important, actually they're likely to be on the better spectrum of the aging process in terms of pace. In other words, aging more slowly. And one of the ways that we use, and my group particularly are really interested in this particular way of measuring the aging process, is epigenetic clocks. Now I said the genes are fixed, and they are, we can do nothing about the genes. But we can actually measure our biological clocks by bits that stick out from the genes, called methylated sites. They're almost like bits of spaghetti stuck onto the gene. And our genes give instructions to those sites and tell them what proteins to make, including the proteins involved in oxidative stress in the cell. What we saw that those long-lived animals had resistance to. So measuring those methylated sites helps us to have a good sense of how old cells are. And we now have clocks. We contributed recently to a cardiovascular clock from my group, clocks which actually measure aging of each of the organs. So we can measure how old your bones are, how old your muscle is, how old your heart is, how old your liver is, etc. It still doesn't say how long you're going to live. It doesn't tell us that. We're getting there. It's a new science. And what I want to show is how early those changes in those clocks start to take place. So we saw the pictures of the babies, we saw the pictures of the 60-year-old men. And I'm going to describe a study, the DeVita study, which started, unlike Tilda, which starts at age 50, collecting data. This one started in 1 year in Dunedin in New Zealand, 1,000 births, and followed those births from that 1 year through. Now they're age 50. And so they were able to actually look at very interesting time periods in teenage times and early adulthood that we don't have immediate access to. And measure biological aging, those wiggly bits that stick out of the genes, the methylated sites, the biological clock. So all of this study participants, they were all the same age when this study was done. They were all 30 because they were all born in the same year. So they were all the same chronological age, same number of candles on their birthday cake in that year. But their biological aging was hugely diverse. Look, it varied from 30 to 50 almost, biologically. And that's at the tender age of 38. So when you were 38, whatever was going on in your lives had already started influencing biological aging. And the big things they found were socioeconomic status, where those young adults were in society. Health behaviors, were they smoking, were they drinking, were they using drugs, and childhood experiences. Childhood experiences was huge. Was there depression in the house? Was there alcohol excess in the house? Was there abuse in the house? So they're the factors that make a difference. And you know, there was a saying, I think by the Jesuits, give me a boy before the age of 7 and I'll make a man of him. Sorry, politically correct maybe now, but you know what I mean. Yeah. And in fact, it may well be a truism in the context of this science, because the process of aging actually embeds very, very early, and it's fastest at a cellular level up to the age of 7, and then it kind of plateaus out a little bit. And I think of aging like ourselves like a washing machine. Basically, you put the clothes in, the water goes around, but there's dirty water produced and we have to get rid of it. So the clothes being in and the water going around are the energy production in our cells, and that's all our cells are there for, to produce energy, to make wherever they are in the body work, and to reproduce. That's their only function. But they have to get rid of these toxins, the byproducts of energy. We get it in oil, we get it in all industry. If there's a byproduct from energy production, you have to get rid of it. And it's slowing down of the processes, the oxidative processes, back to this, our animals again, slowing down of those oxidative processes in the cell, which accelerates the aging process and causes the cells to die. So it's like a washing machine, and basically what we get is our DNA, our genes, through the wiggly bits, and making RNA, which are the wiggly bits which will produce protein, and translating those RNA instructions into protein, and really important proteins which produce energy and make us work. And if we can't get rid of those toxins that accumulate in cells, we get inflammation in the cells. The cells become inflamed. And that's what's really bad for us. Really bad for us. And the biggest things that cause inflammation in our cells are stress, psychological stress, worry, stress, anxiety. You know it well. We all know it. And a few other things like lack of physical activity, sometimes lack of confidence, lack of friendship, but they all seem to go through these stress pathways. Stress externally, stress to the cell, and then eventually accumulation of these toxins and lack of oxidative processes that are beneficial to the cell. And we have a load of ways of measuring stress in the cells. But the epigenetics, the wiggly bit here, is by far the most accurate. complex, and we've not got there yet. So if anybody's listening thinking, I'm sorry, the temperature is increasing in this room, I'm sure everybody feels like passing out. I don't know if we can cool it. Can we cool the room in any way? Even open the doors. I start to cough, which goes beyond a certain temperature. I get, so I'm going to talk with my mouth full now. Thank you. Okay, so it's very complex. We cannot accurately measure your biological aging yet. There are lots of websites that say they can, but it actually isn't useful information. It's not as useful as how fast can you walk. It's not as useful as, is your cholesterol normal? It's not as useful as, is your blood pressure normal? So at the moment, at this point in time, but it's a very rapidly changing field, we cannot use all of these measures to say precisely what age you are. There are companies which will tell you you can, and which are making billions from it, but actually, honestly, it isn't as good as what I just told you. The things that have been around for a long time and very, very well validated for a long time. Okay, so lifespan, and what are the things that we can really do about ourselves, making the process better? Number one is quality of relationships. The very fact that you're here in Wexford today, sharing each other, networking, not sharing each other, sharing with each other. Sure, who knows? Sharing with each other, and networking, engaging, getting ideas, having a purpose, all of those things matter. And presumably you walked here from wherever you live, so you get your exercise. And weight. I'm going to talk about some of these things. And creativity. So even the thought processes today are parts of creativity. But creativity is also very important for influencing the environmental factors relevant to aging. Because all of these things, and it's only very recently we know this, all of these things influence inflammation and stress in the cells, and influence how fast we can get rid of those toxins out of the cells. That's why they're important, and there's really good evidence for this. But of course, no drug company is going to make a fortune on the value of relationships. Where's the money? Where's the money on that? Where's the money on creativity? Where's the money on exercise, or having a purpose, etc.? So it's not out there as much as it should be because there aren't corporates pushing it. And of course, you all know the blue zones now. The 5 zones in the world where proportionately more people live to 100 or more relative to their mainland, because they're all nearly by the sea. There's Loma Linda in California, it's an Adventist community. There's Nicoya in Costa Rica, Sardinia in Italy, my favorite. Ikaria in Greece, and Okinawa off the Japanese coast. But people don't just live to 100 more often in those areas than expected. They live well. They live without the disorders and diseases we associate with aging, like arthritis, like dementia, like hypertension, like stroke, like heart disease. So they get them, but they get them a lot later when they're over their hundreds, and they don't seem to get them as aggressive, by and large. So what are they doing that's different? They are moving naturally throughout the day. This is terribly obvious in the blue zones, particularly Sardinia. I visited Sardinia. And they're moving around all the time. They never drive to the shops, no such thing. And not only that, but they're all on heights. So you've got 100-year-olds walking up after doing the shopping, carrying shopping bags, having been down in the market, buying fresh food, homemade food, no ultra-processed foods. They do a lot of gardening, light gardening, and we now know that there's a very rich science behind the benefits of gardening. There's even a mycobacterium in the soil, which is similar to, which has a neurotransmitter in it that shares the same pathways as some of the drugs we use to treat depression. Serotype. So gardening has a lot of pluses for it. And the Sardinians do a lot of that. Grow their own vegetables all the time until the day they leave in a coffin. They have vegetable patches. I remember vegetable patches. Everybody had a vegetable patch. Everybody had their own vegetables. We've lost that. We've even, I think, the last generation anyway, have lost the art of how to grow vegetables by and large. And when reading is also de-stressing and beneficial, but when you compare gardening with reading in terms of all of the factors we can measure which are associated with stress, gardening comes out on top. So if you can do it, do it. And as I said, walking in nature. So there are experiments comparing walking on a treadmill, same amount of exercise, etc., watching maybe a television screen, and walking in nature. And in terms of the beneficial effects at a hormonal level, at a cellular level, walking in nature trumps walking on treadmills. Yeah. So nature matters. Green space matters, and blue space, the sea matters. Again, lots of research around that. And this is part of the community. This is a picture from Loma Linda where the Adventists pray every day. But they have very rich communities. All of the 5 zones have very rich communities. And I'll tell you a story which kind of underscores that a bit later on, experience of a colleague of mine. A sense of belonging, a sense of being, now again, unfortunately, in Ireland we had this. Yeah. In our communities we had a sense of belonging. And maybe some of you who are still in rural Ireland, living in rural Ireland, still have that sense of belonging. We've certainly lost it in our cities. I live in Dublin. It certainly is lost in our cities. And I also go to Lewisburg and Mayo a lot. And I have to say, it doesn't have the same rich sense of community that it used to have. It's just about the way they built roads, which have gone straight through traditional communities, etc. And also taking the heart out of small villages and towns. You know, taking a post office take away from a town or village takes a point of congregation for people. That is a sense of community. I'll come back to that maybe a bit more in the discussion. It's something I'm very enthusiastic about. And the world's longest lived people have close friends and social related networks. This is very dramatic research. How much having close friends means. And a problem shared is a problem had. And I come back to stress, psychological stress and cell stress. That's the main driver for a faster aging process. And all a faster aging process is an accumulation of diseases. That's all it means. But sharing problems does result in de-stressing. Both de-stressing psychologically and de-stressing at a cell level. Friends matter. I just tell you an aside. So when I wrote the book on age group during COVID, and I was writing about friendship, the science behind friendship, and I thought, God, I haven't seen people from my school. I was in 2 different schools for a long time. So I contacted one from each of the schools and said, you know, and they were saying, oh yeah, wouldn't it be great if we got together? Anyway, long story short, WhatsApp groups started, and we started to meet. And my phone doesn't stop pinging all day because, you know, the same message goes around. But it's been such a lovely experience because you've nothing to lose at this stage, you know. There's nothing, you know, it's only what friendships you shared. And you know, there's no competition. It's not like that. It's a very different experience when you meet people. It was a very, very valuable experience. So I've thoroughly enjoyed it. So that was my own action as a result of the research that I was doing, thinking, well, you're talking about this, advising on this, you're not doing it yourself. And loved ones. In the blue zones, it's not uncommon to have 3 generations in one household. So they live in these narrow houses all the way up with 3 generations, if not in the household, very close by. And again, that's something that unfortunately our modern society has fragmented totally. Kids immigrate, and you're very lucky if you have the next generation and their next generation anywhere within shouting distance of you. Usually that is not the case. I have a colleague in China who's doing work on a similar study there, who told me in the villages in China that amongst females particularly, suicide rates are up to 10%. And they explored this in some of the villages. They explored this, and the reason was the one-child family. And the one child, because they did well with education, had gone to the cities for lucrative jobs, rather than living in the poor rural community. And the mother didn't want to be a burden on that child when she herself starts to feel frailer and maybe needing some assistance. So they have very high suicide rates amongst females. So that's very sad, I think, tale with respect to how our societies have changed and so-called progress. This is a great story. And this kind of underpins everything I've been saying about social engagement, friendship, networks, families, but also about having a purpose and variety and meaning. It really matters to us. All we are animals. And we've evolved to need to be on this earth to procreate and to produce energy in order to enable procreation and to get food so that we can produce that energy. That's what we do. If you watch animal behavior, that's us. So once we lose the purpose, once we lose a meaning in life, we involute. And we see at a cellular level, a faster aging process biologically in people who don't appear to have a purpose, a meaning. You can make purpose out of anything. And part of that purpose is variety, a reason to get up. But I'll come on to that. This man illustrates a lot of what I'm saying very nicely. So my friend went to see him, he was over 100, I think he was 103, I'm not sure. This isn't his photograph, obviously I had to, I didn't have permission to speak about the man himself. So she went to Sardinia, great excuse to go to Sardinia to study social networking. And she was sitting in his kitchen trying to actually understand what it was about his life that had enabled him to live to 103. So she was sitting in the kitchen, and his kitchen was at the front of this house, typical Sardinian house, and people passing by all of the time. So everybody, the door open, kitchen door open. We used to have that too.
Yeah.
Kitchen door open, so everybody who passed had to pop in to say hello or whatever. And she said, the family were all living, and every time somebody got up, they came down to the kitchen, they were chatting to them, telling one another, next generation, there were 4 generations in this house. And chatting about that. And everybody who passed coming in, and she said he was hilarious about that because once a woman came in and he was all chatting, she was all chatting, whatever, and then she left, and he turned to the researcher and he said, I can't stand that woman. But anyway, the bottom line was, the researcher, didn't have a chance to interview him properly. Because his day was constantly changing with variety, with people, with chatting, with the news locally. People coming in and out, family coming up and down, and then we better do lunch. So she left and she thought, God, that's the secret. That's what it is. He hasn't time to die. Or go away. And actually, research shows this. This is a very good meta-analysis of over 300,000 people from different studies looking at social networking. Well-characterized studies like Tilda, so that they could actually correct for all of the confounders, all of the things about these people's lives that might have influenced a positive aging process. And they came down to looking at questioning social friendships as an independent risk factor for aging, and death from heart disease, and showed that it was as strong a predictor of dying from heart disease as smoking, or alcohol excess, or high untreated cholesterol. That's how powerful friendship is at a biological level. And we've shown the same thing in Tilda. We've shown that people who volunteer in Tilda are significantly less likely to get depression, have a much better quality of life, and less disability. They're faster walkers, they have less arthritic pain. So, by networking, you're reducing inflammation in cells, and all of those symptoms I've just described are associated with inflammation. Arthritis is inflammation. You take anti-inflammatories for it. You take Nurofen. Yeah? Having a good laugh, which is generally what you do with friends, is also very good. We've evolved to need laughter. So laughter is a way of social bonding, social communication. We can actually make mice or rats laugh by tickling them. That's not my hand. But I believe the research. So having a good laugh is, and if you pause for a minute and think of what I just said, you know that. You know, if you go out with friends at night, 1 or 2 glasses of wine, great laugh, next morning you feel so good. That's because you've purged yourself of inflammation and cellular stress. So a good laugh matters. And this is the purpose of it. And to show you how important purpose is, in the 5 zones, they actually have special names for having a purpose. Ikagi, the Okinawans call it. The Nicoyans Plan de Vide. And basically what it translates into is knowing why you wake up in the morning. And the research has shown that having a purpose, now, very often people say to me when I say this, they say, oh yeah, that's all very well, but I'm retired now. My purpose was my work. Purpose can be sitting up in the bed in the morning and saying, okay, today I'm going to do this, 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 and this, and I'm making a list. That's your purpose. As an animal, you reorientate yourself to recognize those purposes, and you have meaning again. That's what purpose is. So it isn't just about working. You can make purpose. We have to try to make purpose. And de-stressing. They all have de-stressing systems, and everything I'm sharing, they overlap. Having a purpose overlaps with not being stressed, overlaps with social networking, because that gives you a purpose on your list. I'm going out with the lads tonight for mine, only one. They all overlap. They're not discrete. But stress is also part of life in the blue zones, but all of the blue zones also have de-stressing rituals. The Adventists pray every afternoon at 4 o'clock. The Icarians take a nap. The Sardinians do happy hour. And I discovered today, you wouldn't pass me my phone, please. A Sardinian wine, which has, it was just this morning that this research came out, which has, I'll put the sweet down, I promise I'll have it, which has 3 times the antioxidants than regular wine in it. I said, hold on, I sent the photograph to my husband. So he's retired, so I said, send it to him. It's called Sardinia. Something like that. Here it is. It's Cano de Sardegna. Sardegna. Cano di Sardegna. 3 times the antioxidants, because the Sardinians, when they do happy hour, they have 2 glasses of red wine. I've got in trouble before for recommending that, but now I'm specifically recommending Cano de Sardegna. And they share their problems, and it's part of the list in the morning. And they've done their shopping. They've walked up the hill. They've walked down the hill, and probably up the hill again. They've walked down to communal areas, and you'll have seen this in hot climates. It's so much easier to congregate in squares, etc., and talk and de-stress. Okay, so de-stressing, and finally, I want to talk about food. The bottom line with the blue zones and people who do live long, healthy lifespan is no sugar. No artificial sugar. I'm not talking about fruit. Fruit's okay. No artificial sugar. No ultra-processed foods. And no, if you're not taking ultra-processed foods, you won't be taking salt over and above what you might like to add to your food, which is fine, but it's not already added for you by companies. So ultra-processed foods, we know from recent work, are really bad. And I've described to you what a typical blue zone plate is. It's fresh food, fresh vegetables, their own chickens, their own eggs, their own fish. There aren't ultra-processed foods pretty much at all for sale in their local little markets. So really try and think. Anything which is packaged, which is wrapped, is ultra-processed. Point about ultra-processed is a company needs to make money out of it. So it has to think of a new way of refashioning and repurposing ingredients. So it's peculiar to them, and then they market that. That's their USP. So if there's anything that you don't have naturally in your kitchen, on the back of something, if you're reading it and you don't recognize things, that's ultra-processed. Don't buy it. I hope everybody's on vitamin D at this stage. We've had such a vigorous campaign over COVID for vitamin D. Now, there's a challenge with vitamin D because it comes in two forms in terms of when it's being marketed and sold. It's in micrograms and it's in international units, and they're hugely different in the amounts. So 25 micrograms is equal to 400 international units. So if you get those mixed up and you take 400 micrograms, that's toxic. It's very important to know. So remember IU, international units, IU will be on the container. And I take 1,000 IU a day. And there's lots of emerging evidence for benefit, not just for bones and muscle, but actually for immunity. And less likely to be admitted to hospital with COVID, and less likely to get very sick with COVID. That was during the COVID days, obviously. But we still have it. Oh, I take it all the time. I will never stop. Everybody should be. Now, in Ireland, 50% of people over the age of 50 are deficient. If you get a lot of sunlight exposure, you're less likely to be deficient in the summertime, obviously, and in autumn. But as skin gets older, even then, sunlight doesn't permeate and have the same metabolic effect on vitamin D metabolism. So there's no harm in taking it all of the time, and it's only good. And the other thing that is remarkable in Sardinia is they don't have big plates of food. And only eat to 80% of feeling full. You know, when we were growing up, we were told, finish everything up on your plate. There are children in Africa who love to have that piece of potato. One of those awful Brussels sprouts. Well, actually, the science is, and let me show you, these are two rhesus monkeys. On the day they were born, a group of rhesus monkeys in this experiment, half of the rhesus monkeys got the normal diet, half of them, for 20 years, got 60% of their normal, of what was expected intake. So their daily intake was reduced by 20%. So, they're all the same chronological age, like the Dunedin study, but they don't quite look the same, do they? Which of them looks older? Hands up for A. Hands up for A, which is A is this one, C is this one. So hands up for A being the eldest. Okay? And then just hands up so we can see for C being the eldest. I showed you them from the side. I'll show you from the side. Always ask somebody to turn sideways. They're the same chronological age. They're both 20 years of age. But that's what calorie restriction did. Now, I can't talk in detail about calorie restriction because it's a whole long science. I mean, we don't have the time to cover it. But actually, I'm an advocate. I think there's very strong science for it, and I've just given you that example. But just to say that we know from lots of research studies that it acts positively on the brain, it enhances parasympathetic activity, that's the vagus nerve, which slows us down, de-stresses us, the rest digest nerve. It acts on food metabolism, on the heart, in food sensitivity at a liver level, muscle, and fatty acid mobilization. Lots of benefits. So think about it. Now, I have to say, the studies in people 80 and over aren't as good. There aren't as much data. And I think better, in my experience, better to reduce the amount you take in at meals rather than fasting for 16 hours a day, which is one of the calorie restriction regimes, for example. And there are some medications now which we're exploring which actually mimic calorie restriction, might be easier. Resveratrol is a supplement, you can buy it anywhere. Metformin is an anti-diabetic drug, and there are studies still ongoing, so we don't know the result of metformin yet. Do you want to open the windows? Somebody did something a while ago that was great, and now it's got hot again. I also run the Syncope Clinic, which is the fancy word for fainting, so I really finished the clinic this morning. So it would be good if we could do something. Percentin also something you can get in supplement shops. These are polyphenols and antioxidants, coming back to that again. And there's nice work in. Probably the most promising is rapamycin, which is an mTOR inhibitor. We use it with cancer treatment as a part of an adjunct to cancer treatment in people, but it's not available for aging. So at the moment, resveratrol, Phesatin, Percentin are mimics at a cellular level. Hand up, those of you who are underwater swimmers. Oh, is that all? Good girl. Good girl. Great. Wow. Don't be telling anybody. Wow, well, brilliant. Because again, I'm writing a book at the moment on the autonomic nervous system, which is all about cold water and immune and the vagus nerve and that. There is so much evidence behind this. So, okay. Very difficult for some to do this, but it isn't difficult to have a cold shower every morning. And it doesn't matter, there isn't, once you get the shock of the cold shower, it seems that that's enough to invigorate you. You don't need to stay a long period of time under it. I started this about 5-6 years ago now, maybe, and my husband used to say at the beginning that he thought he'd have to get the house soundproofed. But I miss it now, if I don't have it. I miss it in the morning. If I forget it, and it's very rare, I think, what's wrong with me this morning? And I didn't have it. It's a very good booster for the immune system, but also for the autonomic nervous system. And I want to just leave you with a very positive note of being positive, because you are as young as you feel. Our studies absolutely show that. So people in the study, in the Matilda study, who, when asked what age do you feel, they stated they were in their chronological age. And we were able to look at all of those omnibus factors that might have influenced that, independent of whether they had arthritis, independent of how frail they were, independent of anything else. Their attitude governed their biological age and the pace of aging, because we've been doing the study now for 12 years. So people who felt younger than their age, 10 years, 20%, I know you do, 10 or 20% younger than their age, biologically are younger. So you are as young as you feel. And now I'm coming onto the media, and another thing that vexes me is ageism, ageist attitudes. We've really grappled and got got very far advanced with sexism. Not there yet, but very advanced. And racism. Not there yet, but very advanced. But it's like it's okay to be ageist. It's grand. It doesn't matter. Even the media is constantly, even our president and his wife, there are derogatory ageist statements consistently in the media, written media, about them. Inappropriate and appalling. Wouldn't be tolerated for sex. Wouldn't be tolerated for race. They would be criminally offensive. And yet, somehow, because it's age, we can say it, or the media can say it. So, if you give young psychology students divide the class in two. This half of the class is getting these words to think about. Accomplished, advised, alert, astute, creative, enlightened, guidance, improving, insightful, learned, sage, wise. And this half are getting words to think about: Alzheimer's, confused, declined, decrepit, dementia, dependent, diseases, dying, lots of D's, forgets, incompetent, misplaces, senile, right? So these are young, they're in their 20s, so you're getting the positive ones, you're getting the negative ones. Now I'm going to give all of you a stress test, a mental stress test. I'm going to put you under psychological stress, everybody. Before I do, I'm measuring your hormones, your stress hormones, and I'm measuring heart rate on everybody, blood pressure on everybody, and other cardiovascular markers of stress. Put you through the stress test, and then I repeat the blood hormone tests, and I repeat the nerve tests, cardiovascular nerve tests. You guys, with the positive words, do significantly better and experience significantly less biological stress after the stress test. We now know because you've been exposed to a positive attitude, and that helped the whole stress process in your body. Unfortunately, obviously, you did worse. Because you've been subjected to this, which puts you into a negative inflammatory phase. So attitude matters. Words matter. Perceptions matter. So, that's me finished.